There's quite a bit of work going on in microbial contamination in leafy vegetables at the moment. Just recently on the podcast, we covered a project being run by DPI New South Wales aiming to identify and manage risk areas for contamination in current industry practice, which is a bit of a stepping stone to the introduction of the new FSANZ standard for leafy veg coming into force in 2025. Does your project have a similar driver?
No, not specifically. So there's a strategic advisory panel for the vegetable industry as part of Hort Innovation, and part of their purview is just to keep an eye on what's happening around the place so that there's continuous development within the industry. So certainly it has a focus, but we're not doing any lab work. We're just seeing what's happening in the rest of the world in that space around pre-harvest sanitation, but as well as that looking at irrigation water sanitation as well. So we've done a literature review, but we've also consulted with Australian industry. We'll also get international reviewers to have a look at it and provide feedback as well. So it should be a fairly up-to-date review of what the potential is, or what the potential and problems are for pre-harvest irrigation, and then disinfection of water as well for irrigation. And there's a few other bits to it as well, just putting all of that into the context of how do we normally manage food safety in the fresh produce industry, and particularly in this case, leafy green vegetables.
You're looking at research in this area from across the globe. What's the current standard of research in this area internationally?
Well, as far as we could see, we could only find 3 publications that talk specifically about pre-harvest sanitation, and 2 of those are Australian, and 2 of them have actually work that was done through the University of Tasmania, so we should declare that. But there's not a lot published on it.
Are there other countries who have particularly good industry practice around managing pre-harvest contamination?
Well, it's really hard for us to actually access that information because, it's not published. So that's what we're struggling at the moment. And finding those papers is hard. What we can find papers on is sanitising the actual irrigation water itself. So that provides us some information, and we can extrapolate from that.
Do you see pre-harvest being a bigger contamination risk factor than post-harvest?
Contamination mostly happens in the field, and that's why post-harvest there's a lot of work done to try and clean product as best we can. But again, fresh produce is difficult because it doesn't get cooked and you can't treat it with too many chemicals or heat. And so getting the cleanest product off the paddock is really important. So that's why pre-harvest sanitation is of interest. But whether it's practical and feasible, in terms of cost versus benefit and so on, that's part of what we were trying to look at as well. But realistically, there's not a lot of evidence to say how would you actually do it in terms of what we know about sanitation in other situations where you're using chemical treatments. So again, it comes down to the amount or the concentration, the time of contact, and then perhaps temperature as well, but that's probably less of an issue. So getting all of those things combined, there's also studies done on different sanitisers, and some of them are better than others, and so that was part of it. But there's very, very little information in terms of pre-harvest, much more post-harvest in terms of disinfection of water.
So looking at irrigation water, what kind of chemistry can people maybe look at using there?
Well, we've got those quite a common fertilisers, sanitisers, and they're normally like your chlorine. That's a number one post-harvest sanitizer. Then we have electrolyzed water is another new one that's coming up and very popular. And PAA is another one, peroxyacetic acid. And the 4th one is ozone. Yeah, so there's a number of options out there.
They're all chemical oxidants. As well as that, you can physically treat water with filters and all sorts of other things, and probably UV sterilisation. They're also considered to be not that effective longer term, very expensive to do and difficult. So chemicals in the water is considered to be a better option.
So an area for further research?
Yeah. And there's much more in the international literature about that. And there's a set against how efficacious pre-harvest would be. So that's sort of the dilemma at the moment. Just trying to see if we can extrapolate a little bit from what we know about treating, bulk water as to seeing what it might do in the field. Yeah.
And where do you think future research should focus?
There's a lot. It's a huge area. As I said, there's not much research been done in it. So our team would be really excited to do some more work in this area to show that these, potentially post-harvest sanitisers could have some efficacy in pre-harvest situation. But, you know, it's a matter of whether, you know, it's worth going down that road. Yeah.
And I guess that's what this sort of desktop review is meant to try and identify. Is it worth investing more research into that area or not? And so, we'll see how we go. There's a fair degree of scepticism, I think, from the people that we spoke to. They're just saying, how would you make that work? And so partly that'll be the discussion we'll have as well. So how would you make it work? So we're not wanting to write off the idea, but just say, let's be serious about it. If we're going to invest more, we better know what we're doing.